The role of ministry is often described as work of service. And in a community of faith, that can mean many things, including leading Sunday services. This is a ministry that is often also shared with lay leaders, as is often the case here at the Unitarian Fellowship of Sarnia and Port Huron. There are other ministries that we share. Now, just as many of you might do at different times in your lives, I have also held a job in what is formally called the service industry, literally serving food and drink. And sometimes members of our communities of faith fulfill that role at our congregational gatherings at times when this makes sense. Whenever some of you serve food or beverages for the community, along with taking care of the other logistical aspects that this entails, like setting up the space, cleaning up, taking down. In other words, we serve each other in our congregations in many kinds of ways. Some sound like more practical kinds of service than others, but they are all offers of service. Now, like some among you, I have done this semi-professionally. For a couple of years, I held a part-time job with an event staffing agency. We were freelance butlers of sorts. And that's what we called each other in our agency's culture, the butlers. Our jobs included table and bar service for different kinds of events, from small house parties to large gala dinners. And yes, in addition to my license to solemnize marriages, I also have a Smart Serve certificate, or in other words, a bartending license. And one of the gigs that I once worked at was a private fundraising dinner. It was a schmancy affair at a swanky home in a high-end Toronto neighborhood. The menu had been meticulously chosen. The desserts looked like works of art. And the decor was fancifully laid out with purpose-made mood lighting, flower arrangements, a color theme, and trendy candle holders that were whimsically suspended inside cute bird cages that were hung around the main guest table. The meal service was pretty standard. Hors d'oeuvres, cocktails, sit down, salad, main course, schmancy dessert. We've done this plenty of times. My fellow butlers and I lined up to serve the salad. A small platoon of us filed out, and each of us served our guest diners 2 plates at a time. And just as I was rounding the halfway point around the table, I suddenly found myself seeing stars and then felt a warm drip around my ear and side of the face. It turns out I had crashed into a birdcage. The kind of birdcage that held an hour's worth of melted paraffin wax, which was now dripping down my side onto my agency-approved black shirt, black tie, black vest, and black pants uniform, as well as my shoes. Also, it was on my hair. The wax was on my hair. In a moment of crisis management brilliance, I arranged for a co-working butler to serve the rest of my allotted salad while I was sheepishly walked over to my supervisor. And with wax slowly hardening on my clothes, I explained the situation. And I went on to fill out the WSIB Workers' Safety and Insurance Board mandated incident report. My supervisor was graceful enough. She didn't make a big deal out of it and did helpfully suggest, however, that I relieve my colleague who was on dish duty so that they may take my place on table duty, as my uniform was no longer up to industry standard. While no blame was named, I did feel rather foolish at my misstep And many questions came to mind as I started piling dirty dishes into plastic bins. Questions like, how did I not see the bird cage? Could I have avoided the bird cage? Why am I the only one to have crashed into the bird cage? My relationship with the bird cage featured deeply into my sense of ineptness at my job of putting down plates of salad. I felt foolish and had existential questions about my ability to perform in the service industry, what we might call negative self-talk, as I was holding myself responsible for this unforeseen incident. At some point into the main course, one of my senior colleagues joined me on dish duty. It turns out that the seemingly static bird cage had a way of sneaking up on people. With a slightly banged up head and an even more banged up ego, some wax on her shirt and pants, my colleague's company offered me an odd comfort. I may have been a fool, but I wasn't the only one. A few minutes into the schmancy dessert, my supervisor walked into the kitchen and declared, "The photographer just got waxed." I saw a very professional looking fellow with silver hair and an expensive camera walking in. Paraffin featured heavily on his corduroy jacket, and he was casually talking about how he would word the invoice for his dry cleaning bill. By that point, I no longer felt foolish anymore. It was clear to me that it wasn't simply a matter of me absently bumping into a birdcage full of wax, or about my colleague being equally clumsy. There was something else going on. In other words, the problem was systemic. Something about the layout in the venue's decor lent itself to workers reliably being whacked on the head and waxed over their bodies and clothes. Now, I believe that the interior decorator for this particular event never had it in their program plan to harm workers, or more specifically, to spill hot paraffin over them. I am convinced that that particular outcome was never part of their intent. In fact, the presence of the event staff might have quite possibly never entered into their consideration at all. And yet their layout had a measurable impact on the people responsible for making the event happen, the event staff. Some of my colleagues were newbies like me, but it also included more seasoned service staff, as well as full-out professionals with years of experience. It wasn't a matter of one individual's personal ability or shortcomings. It was the structure in place that was inherently problematic and prone to cause harm to an entire category of people involved in the event. In this case, the service workers. My friends, in our communities, our living covenant calls us to grow into awareness toward nurturing right relations with each other. And in the process of considering how our covenants apply to us, it serves us to take into account the kinds of questions we can ask of ourselves and others when deciding who we are, where we are, and how we want things to be. Examining who we think about or don't think about. Examining how we think about others, and moreover, how we can allow the wider community and the systems in it to foster safer spaces. Spaces where we can be mindful of our intentions and their impacts. And spaces where we can improve accountability among each other, not just as individuals, but as a community. My friends, increasing our awareness and improving our actions at an individual level has value. Our individual actions can have an impact in reducing harm to those who are not always taken into consideration by the systems that may be in place. And in addition to this personal accountability, we can also contribute to a larger mission of shifting the structures of those systems that predictably and reliably fail those who aren't considered by those systems. My friends, may our growing awareness lead the way to a safer, more inclusive, beloved community.